Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Roger Klayman. I'm with the Long Island Federation of Labor, but I've been recruited by Eric to be his facilitator for this discussion, which is very important to everybody from all perspectives. For us in the labor movement, it's tremendously important because our members live in the community and have a big stake over many years in promoting clean water. We also have a great stake in building infrastructure, not only from the job creation aspect of it, but from the fact that it creates more livable communities, which has really been the approach taken by Vision Long Island. And you know, it's really something that kind of unites all of us in building a better place to live. So we haven't really orchestrated this real well, but we're meeting it for the first time in some cases. But I think we have sort of a general way we want to approach this topic of infrastructure and water quality. And I wanted to start, and you guys, when I introduce you, since I don't know all of you well or know your organizations, please give everybody a background to begin with of who you are and what your organization does. So Ali and I have had a chance to talk a little bit, you know, online about his background, but I want to start because I know you have a vast experience in working on the governmental side and in the private sector in dealing with infrastructure generally. So Ali Chaudhry is with AECOM, and I'm going to let you lead off again.
Thank you so much. Good morning. It's good to be here. My name is Ali Chaudhry. I'm Senior Vice President, Chief Development Officer for AECOM in the New York Metro region. I'm 2 months in, almost, with AECOM. Before then, for 4 years, I worked for Governor Cuomo for the state of New York. I'm not an engineer or an architect. I'm a non-traditional person in this space. I'm an attorney, and I worked as Governor Cuomo's Counsel for Transportation and Economic Development for 2.5 years, and as Deputy Secretary for Transportation in my last stint with him. In that field, I worked as a transaction lawyer, as a public finance lawyer on many of the projects that I think everybody's going to be talking about today, whether it's third track, double track, Long Island Railroad Transformation, which is the $6.6 billion program, the Tappan Zee Bridge, Second Avenue Subway, Javits expansion, LaGuardia Airport redevelopment, and there's a few others. In this particular context, I'd like to start off talking more generally about infrastructure funding and issues, and sort of talk a little bit more about water infrastructure funding in particular. What I always like to start off with when it comes to infrastructure as a conversation is that there's a context to this and some history. We should all be aware of the fact that maybe about 100 years ago, New York was the pioneering state, if not just in this country, but globally for infrastructure. That's true for transportation, but that's also true for water, that's also true for power. We did things in this state that nobody else had done before, whether it's the first traffic tunnel underwater, whether it's the largest bridges, longest bridges, most trafficked airports, or whether it's distribution of electricity at a commercial level. And for various reasons in this country, we've stopped funding infrastructure and we stopped prioritizing it sort of from the 60s and 70s onwards. There's multiple factors for it. Labor costs went up significantly, 70s onwards. Education and healthcare costs dramatically increased. And that all sort of happened at the cost of infrastructure spending and infrastructure investments. As context for the state of New York, 50% of the state budget annually is dedicated exclusively to education and healthcare costs. So when it comes to balancing the state budget, and I worked on 8 of them, you can't cut education or healthcare, so any savings or efficiencies on the state side is everything else that's on the 50% end of the state budget. And guess what? For a long time, infrastructure has been on the receiving end of those cuts. Governor Cuomo and his administration, I'm proud to say, invested heavily in infrastructure for the state of New York in the last 6-7 years. It's the largest infrastructure program in the country today. It's almost $120 billion of obligations and commitments. And the governor on the re-election campaign has offered an additional $150 billion of investments as a promise if he was to be re-elected, and obviously he has been. So just in that context, I'm not in the administration, so I don't speak for the administration, but at least publicly, this is the breakdown of $150 billion for folks that like to keep track of it, so that you can see what the future holds for this region and the rest of the state. It's about $60 billion for transportation, $32 billion for the environment and green energy technology. That includes the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, the state match towards it. There's $11 billion for economic development, for those of you who are interested on that front, for Long Island and the region. $9 billion for affordable housing, $19 billion for school construction, and $13 billion for higher education to the SUNY and the CUNY school systems. So, 70s onwards, when infrastructure spending began to dry up, a large driver of that has been the federal government. That's very true for transportation. Transportation commitments from the federal government have continually been deteriorating. And interestingly enough, on the water side, there's been a renewed interest from the federal government to actually invest in it, which is unique, I believe, in the infrastructure space. Currently, though, federal investment in water infrastructure spending is less than 1%. So states, counties, and municipalities have to figure out how to make up for that loss. The peak of that was 1977, when the federal government was implementing the Clean Water Act, and that was about 40% of the expenditure was carried by the federal government. So, where does that leave us today when it comes to infrastructure, and in particular, water infrastructure? Just to provide context here, according to the American Water Works Association, most of our underground water infrastructure is either near or already beyond its useful life. Within the next 20 years, almost all of that infrastructure will have to be replaced. The cost estimate of that is about $1 trillion. And again, for context, annually on average, there's about 240,000 water main breaks that take place in this country already on account of aging infrastructure. The cost of that already is upwards of $2 billion on an annual basis. So it's expensive, it's hefty, we've underinvested in it, and sooner or later we have to pay a price for it. That's the context and the story of it. What can we do to actually address it? I think we'll have a robust conversation here about what revenue streams are available, what municipalities, counties, towns, cities, and especially the state and the federal government have to provide as far as tools are available. I think public-private partnerships is something a lot of people talk about. Some states are experimenting with it, especially when it comes to stormwater, such as in California. But I think at the end of the day, we have to be cognizant of the fact that this is a political issue first and foremost. Most available revenue in water infrastructure comes from the user. It's the ratepayer and it's the user fees that people are paying into the system. It's politically very challenging to advocate for an increase of rates. And that's the problem. So at some point, infrastructure is almost always political, whether it's transportation, whether it's water, and we all own it to an extent. So I hope we can have an honest and robust conversation about what are we going to do about infrastructure needs when it comes to water and clean drinking water for our communities, and what is the cost that people are willing to pay to make the system robust again. I can talk more about some particular infrastructure tools and certain funds such as the Environmental Facilities Corporation or the WIFIA through the federal government, which is a new tool model on the transportation loan structure that's worked very well, but I'll bring it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Great. Citizens Campaign for the Environment has worked for many years on clean water projects on Long Island. Maureen Murphy is here, is going to give us an overview of the projects we're working on now, as well as some of the things they have done over the years as advocates for clean water.
Great.
You need to be over here next to you.
No, it's okay. I was going to use slides, but the room really isn't set up for slides, so I'm just going to not use them. But Citizens Campaign for the Environment is a bi-state organization in New York and Connecticut. We've been working on clean water since our inception, and I've been with the organization now almost 17 years and been working on sewage issues for at least the last 15 years. And I thought it would be good just to take a step backwards as an environmental group. Why we're working on sewage issues is because we want to treat our sewage so we have clean water, and that's the main goal. And here on Long Island, we get all of our drinking water from underground aquifers. So everything that goes into the ground goes into our aquifer system. That's where we get our drinking water. But that water also pushes its way out into all of our rivers, our groundwater fed. It pushes out into our estuaries, into the Sound, into the South Shore estuary, and it really impacts them as well. So in Suffolk County, we have mostly septic systems. We're 70% on septic system in Suffolk County, and in Nassau County, we do have septic systems. We have 30% septic systems, and then 70% sewer. So we have a combination of problems throughout the island. We have septic systems that are putting nitrogen into groundwater, and we have sewage treatment plants that are discharging into our embayments or into the groundwater as well. And over the last decade, we really started to see a host of different problems come up in the form of what we call a rainbow effect of toxic tides. Everything from very severe brown tides in the Great South Bay to rust tide. We saw for the first time in the open waters of Long Island Sound. That was something new we just saw this year. Northport has been the epicenter of red tide, which is a paralytic shellfish poisoning tide. At some points in time, it was so dense, it really, if you ate those shellfish from the waters, you could have paralysis or even death. That's how severe it was in that embayment. And then in the western bays, we have an influx of green algae or ulva, and it's very, very thick mats of seaweed. So thick that it washes up on the ocean beaches, and the town of Hempstead has actually had to go out with snow plows and plow the beaches to remove the seaweed from the beaches so people can put out their blankets and dig in the sand. And all of these rainbow of toxic tides have been scientifically linked to excessive nitrogen and nutrients going into the waters, leading us back to our sewage treatment plants, leading us back to our septic systems. And New York, like we talked about before, has been investing now within the last year. We had $2.5 billion go into clean water infrastructure, which is a huge investment. Diverse Coalition is getting ready and gearing up for 2019, and we're going to be asking for another $2.5 billion investment from the state to go into clean water infrastructure. What's significant about the last investment was there was a $75 million carve-out just to replace old septic systems with new technology that actually removes nitrogen. And in the first year of the funding, $10 million went to Suffolk County to replace their septic systems, and $1 million went to Nassau County to replace their septic systems in the form of grants to homeowners, which is really, really significant. It's the first time there's been this grant program to help homeowners replace their old septics with a new one that actually moves the nitrogen. We also have on the federal level, they've really gotten out of the business of providing funds to the states for sewers. But we do have the SRF, which is not really a grants program, it's more of a loan program for the states. And the federal SRF was funded at $2.3 billion last year. We were just in DC Wednesday requesting that they double the SRF funding, which provides money and loans for clean water infrastructure projects, to $5 billion. $2.3 billion is for the entire country. New York State has invested $2.5 billion. They've already committed $2.5 billion in clean water infrastructure funds just for the state. So we really need the federal government to step up their game. We asked them to double it to $5 billion. And we also are asking them to put more money into a grants program, because that's what we're hearing back from municipalities. They really need grant funding, not just low-interest loan money. We met with Senator Schumer, we met with Senator Blumenthal, we met with Congressman Swazi, Congressman Engel, we met with Nita Lobey's staff, and there was a good response to that. You know, our congressional leaders, Connecticut congressional leaders, they were behind that, so we still have to keep pushing that forward. We also were down there, we asked for, they're now talking about a federal infrastructure package. So we were talking to them that any infrastructure package has to include a clean water infrastructure component. Senator Schumer, he said, yes, I agree, and then he threw out the number of $90 billion for clean water infrastructure, so I think that's a good start. But we really need to ensure that clean water infrastructure gets into any kind of federal infrastructure package. All of the reps that we met with did seem that this was a priority, and they would be moving forward with it within 2019. So that was very hopeful. And then, just to kind of wrap up, from the SRF funds, New York does get 11% of that funding. So it is a formula, the states get, New York gets 11%, so an increase in the federal dollars would mean an increase in New York funding as well here. And I think I'm ready to turn it over.
Okay, all right, thank you. Kind of following this discussion along in a logical manner. Peter Scully is a Deputy County Executive in Suffolk County. I think many of us know him from his work with the DEC as a Long Island representative, but generally knowledgeable guy about our infrastructure and particularly about these water issues. And we're working very closely with Peter now on some very practical, immediate steps we need to take for a few active projects. So Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. I'll apologize ahead of time. I did bring a PowerPoint. I have a tremendous amount of information I'm hoping to share, but if the technology is not going to permit us to use it, I'll be disappointed. Let me see if I can figure this out. As Roger indicated,
I think it's in the bottom here.
I'm sorry.
It's, it's already open.
Sorry. Okay. Somebody help me out here. No idea.
Oh,
There we go. How do I go full page?
view or slideshow.
So, as Roger indicated, I have been working in government on Long Island for about 35 years and worked as the regional director for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation under Governor Cuomo, one of 4 governors who I worked for before leaving DEC to join Suffolk County in May of 2015 because the current county executive, Steve Bellone, unlike county executives before him, decided to step up and take on the challenge of addressing the lack of wastewater infrastructure in the county, which has been a historical problem. While I was at DEC, a coalition of environmental groups calling themselves the Clean Water Partnership, which includes CCE and Nature Conservancy and the Long Island Pine Barren Society, have been pushing for somebody to really step up and take the challenge on this county executive did. And in terms of the infrastructure discussion today, Suffolk County and I, as county executives, water czar, we're the happy recipients of a lot of infrastructure funding, which I'm going to talk about today. And we're going to talk a little bit of it now about actually trying to get stuff in the ground to address water quality. I'm going to try and use the presentation. So the issue in Suffolk County is not a new one. These are news clips that date back to the 60s when Suffolk County was being urged to put sewers in place as suburban development moved ever eastward. You can see the clip on the lower right. I'm sorry if all of you can't see it. At one point, the federal government warned Suffolk County that it would step in and implement sewering along the south shore between Blue Point and Santa Mauritius if the county did not. For reasons that I won't get into here, just for lack of time, sewering of the entire county did not take place, although at one point the county had a Department of Environmental Control and a map that showed sewer districts all the way out both forks to Orient and Montauk. We now know that probably wouldn't have been a good idea. And this is a great quote from a recent meeting of the Suffolk County Legislature's Environment Committee. My good friend and colleague, Jim Tierney, who's the Deputy Commissioner of the Office of Water Resources at DEC, came down and just pointed out on the record it was a huge historical mistake, the development of Suffolk County without sewers. Maureen talked a little bit about what it looks like on a map. Residential single-family properties alone, we have 360,000 individual cesspools and septic systems in the ground. 209,000 of them in areas that are in close proximity to surface water or have 0 to 2 year travel times to surface water and close to groundwater. 250,000 of those systems predate a requirement that was put in place in 1973 that said you can't just have a ring in the ground, you have to have a septic tank in front of it. We have a huge volume of these systems in the ground. Many people would throw up their hands at the number, but County Executive Malone said, no, we're going to make steady progress each year, we're going to establish priorities, we're going to have a long-term commitment to dealing with this historical problem, and it's exactly what we're doing. The way Suffolk County is doing it is embracing 3 approaches. Sewering is an approach we can use in some communities. We're going to talk about sewer projects. Those are, for the most part, in areas where you have an existing treatment facility that's got existing capacity, where you can connect the nearby community. There are some unique exceptions to that rule. But for many areas of Suffolk County, sewering is not an economic, cost-effective, or practical option. And in those areas, we're looking to two other alternatives. One is the use of innovative alternative on-site wastewater treatment systems that are an alternative to cesspools and septic systems. Is there an issue?
Sorry, is that your phone, Brad?
Yes.
Okay. So this, thanks. Sorry.
We'll be talking about those today. We have tremendous infrastructure funding from the state of New York to expand the use of those IA systems. And in the middle, we have this idea of a neighborhood cluster system, which is really kind of a mini sewage treatment plant that can serve a small community. We're looking for an opportunity to land one of those right now. It does require that you have a neighborhood that's conducive and a site for a facility. We have one live proposal in the town of Southampton we're working on in Shinnecock Hills, and we've obtained or received a $1 million grant from DEC to try and put one in place at a mobile home park. And we're looking for a good candidate mobile home park to move forward on. So here's the real reason I came over initially to Suffolk County were these projects. I was at DEC at Superstorm Sandy, and it was one of the most exciting periods of my career for just a whole host of reasons I won't get into. But about a month after the dust had settled, my colleague Jim Tierney from DEC Central Office called me at my office in DEC in Stony Brook and said, you know, there's more than $1 billion available of post-Sandy resiliency funding. I think we can make an argument that excess nutrients from cesspools and septic systems are degrading wetlands. Degraded wetlands are reducing our resiliency to storm surge. Therefore, we should argue that the federal government should invest as part of this post-Sandy resiliency effort in connecting parcels to sewer. We came up with this process for the Suffolk County Coastal Resiliency Initiative. What Jim said was, what do you think the counties on Long Island are prepared to do? You think anybody has anything that was shovel-ready? Well, they're 2 starkly different counties. Nassau County is 75% sewered. Suffolk County is 75% unsewered. Nassau County had suffered major damage to the Bay Park treatment facility and was interested in getting that facility up and running. That was an easy meeting. I didn't know what we could expect when we got to Suffolk, but County Executive Malone and Sarah Lansdale just rolled out a map of these 4 projects, and that proposal became the Suffolk County Coastal Resiliency Initiative, which Governor Cuomo announced in 2015. The relationship between the county executive and the governor has just been fantastic in terms of getting resources for us to use. Here are the 4 projects in brief. They're on river corridors along our south shore, all of which were inundated by Sandy. The Carls River in Babylon, the Connecticut River in Great River, the Patchogue River, and then the most important of the projects is the furthest east on the Forge River watershed, the most eutrophic or anoxic water body in North America perhaps. We have an area on the west with people on lots of 4,000 and 5,000 square feet in high groundwater areas, and that is an entirely new treatment facility to serve the first 2 phases of the 4-phase project the county mapped out in 2012. That's a $200 million project. So, sources of funding for these projects. You know, the state team, the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery worked closely with us and assembled a combination of funding sources. The Hazard Mitigation Grant Program from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery funding from Housing and Urban Development, some loans from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which we're using for design purposes only, and then some other grant sources that the governor has made available to us. Importantly, the Suffolk County Legislature, and I see that Legislator Trotter was with us a little bit earlier, voted at its meeting on November 20th to approve the creation and extension of sewer districts for 3 of the 4 projects contingent on approval by voters at referendum, and we're now planning for a referendum on January 22nd, which will be required for us to move these projects forward. Needless to say, the possibility that the projects won't be supported and will lose this one-time opportunity to utilize all this federal funding is sobering, and so we're hopeful that the community will be supporting the projects. A little bit of the math. The total number of connected parcels on a project-by-project basis. This is around 5,000 parcels, but in addition to funding these 4 individual extensions or creation of sewer districts, this project will also connect every unconnected residential parcel already in our Southwest Sewer District number 3, which number around 1,500, at no cost to the residents. Soup to nuts, connect the house, abandon the cesspool, pump it, fill it. We'll never see an opportunity like this again. The numbers are kind of stark, and you can see on the bottom that sewering on a per parcel basis is an expensive enterprise. We ultimately want to talk about funding sources a little bit. So here's some kind of stark numbers. Sewering can't move forward in Suffolk County in many instances in the absence of some sort of subsidy, only because it's very expensive to sewer. And when you use the provisions in New York State County law that we have to do the work, we create a sewer district, we borrow the money, just like a mortgage, it's got to be repaid, every parcel takes its share. And when you see stark numbers like the one in the top line, you tell members of the public, look, good news, we're going to connect you to sewer, but every year from now on, you're going to be paying another $2,600 or $3,000 in property taxes or sewer taxes. Never, ever going to happen. Never, ever going to happen. And you can see the result on the bottom of the post-Sandy resiliency grants that the governor helped us get, brings the annual charge to the residents down to a more palatable level, particularly in communities like along the South Shore, where folks see their cesspools needing to be pumped several times a year at a cost of $400 or $500 per pump. Getting sewered and never have to worry about that is a great benefit. But the important thing is, without some form of subsidy, most sewering can't happen. And that's a problem, because here's a map of a lot of the sewer projects that are kind of on the radar screen in Suffolk County. Typically what will happen is a community will go to its Suffolk County legislator and say, we really need to get sewers in this community. The Department of Public Works will want to take a feasibility study, determine how much it will cost, and usually things grind to a halt there. The little chart on the bottom has some cost estimates. That's $2.2 billion worth of infrastructure right there, looking for a funding source. Here's some numbers from the Town of Islip feasibility study that they did in 2012 about sewering South Islip, Oakdale, West Sayville, Bayport, places where people are pumping their cesspools out several times a year, making sure that they don't take showers and do laundry on the same day. Really, the severe area that cries out for sewering. Expensive projects. If we connect them to sewer district number 3, the number was $635 million. If you build your own sewage treatment plant, it's $736. The point is that grants of $1 million and $4 million are great. But when the price of a project is $736 million, you need another way to finance it. You see in the bottom what the cost of a resident would be under those 2 scenarios. Obviously, no elected official is going to implement the project and tell people they're going to be facing these annual costs. Similarly, you're not going to be able to take a hard look at this one from where you're sitting, but I had my staff run the numbers on our Kings Park sewer project, which the governor also helped fund. Without any subsidy, what it would cost some of these businesses to pay their sewer rates, they range on this chart from in the $6,000 range up to $400,000 a year for an apartment complex. Not a viable approach. So, point being, there needs to be a stable and recurring revenue stream to help us deal with water quality infrastructure on the sewer side to offset the cost to the individual property owners to make that viable. And for those areas where we can't use sewer because it's not a cost-effective alternative, we need to find a way to use IA technologies. Suffolk County began in 2014 creating a foundation for an evolution away from the use of cesspools and septic systems that don't treat for nitrogen to these new IA technologies. It's a long story. Take much longer than I'm taking already. I'm not going to get into it any further. But in 2017, the county executive launched a grant program to allow people who wanted to voluntarily upgrade their systems from cesspools and septic systems to take advantage of grants from the county. The voters of Suffolk County in 2014 voted to change the county charter to provide, in part, to provide $2 million a year for these grants. And it's a voluntary program, but the response has been great. We have $2 million a year under the program, enough for 200 grants of $10,000 per. We launched the program in 2017. We have over 1,500 people registered already. 400 have completed applications, and we've issued 285 grant certificates. So it's moving, but it's subject to funding limitations. Average cost of the installations is just under $22,000. Not going to bore you with that if you're not. Importantly, the IBM Corporation operates a program called the Smarter Cities Challenge. Municipalities can apply to IBM and say, you know, we're facing this challenge. We'd like IBM to come in and take a look at it and see if they can make recommendations. IBM chose Suffolk County in 2014, sent out a team of international experts to assess the problem. They made some specific recommendations and importantly concluded that for Suffolk County to straighten out its wastewater problem would be an $8 billion. It's not 8 million, it's not 80 million, that's not 800 million, it's 8,000 million, $8,000 million issue. Infrastructure costs money. So we have looked over the past several years at potential alternative revenue streams. I want to make clear that the discussion items I'm about to share with you are neither proposed nor endorsed by my boss, the County Executive of Suffolk County. They are, at this point, they are concepts that were recommended for review by IBM Corporation in its Smarter Cities Challenge report, and they are potentially viable. And the other thing is that a prior speaker talked about how everything is political. And I can tell you that it surely is. You know, we began talking about these concepts in 2016, and things became political right away. We're not doing that because you're proposing it. But unfortunately for the politicians, there are people in the business community and people in the environmental community who realize you can't just put your head in the sand with these issues. One of them is in the room, the chair of the Long Island Regional Planning Council, John Cameron, a prominent leader on Long Island, who's constantly saying, unless we address the need for a stable and recurring revenue stream, we're never going to solve this problem. We need to expand the denominator. It's John's phrase. So here's a couple of ideas that could possibly work. We've been working with other states, and one of the states that is ahead of us is the state of Maryland. To address some of their problems with water quality in Chesapeake, they created what they call a bay restoration fee. They charge each parcel. They started initially charging them $2.50 a month per parcel, and then increased it to $5 or $60 a year. And it's a scenario that could work. Maybe elected officials would be comfortable copying something that works successfully in another state if the voters approved it. But it has the potential to yield at $6 per month as much as $35 million a year in Suffolk County. One possibility. Another is a surcharge on water usage. There are many states where the management of water is a whole cycle management. The same people who are pulling the stuff out of the ground and selling it are responsible for making sure that wastewater is managed and the resources protected. That is not the case here in Suffolk County. But nonetheless, some people have suggested we look at the possibility of a surcharge on water usage as a way to generate revenue to deal with the wastewater issue, and is a reason why IBM suggested it as being potentially viable here. That's the reason. If you look at this rate comparison that my staff prepared in 2017, you'll see that Suffolk County's water rates are a fraction of what people in other municipalities pay. If you added $1 per 1,000 gallons to the rate charged in Suffolk County by the Water Authority, which is a stellar organization, the rate would still be, I think the rates still would be 75% lower than some of the neighboring municipalities. So IBM felt there was some room there. And here are revenue projections associated with what you could do, what you could generate with the water usage surcharge at that amount. At $1 per 1,000 gallons, which is a good round number, our staff projected $75 million a year, which wouldn't solve the problem, but would get you going. At $1.50, you generate more than $100 million a year. Just a couple of ideas. This is a chart I created in 2016, talking about how a water quality improvement district would work. I'm not going to get into that. We're out of time. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, we'll save our questions for after. Thank you, Peter. That's great. Yeah. How do you say your last name? Well, okay. Next is Alan Wellen from Suez, and I could make up some glowing things to say about him, but I'd be making it all up because we're just meeting today. I'm sure they all be true. Alan,
Give it a shot.
we're always glad to hear that.
All right, hi everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Alan Wellen. I'm the general manager for Suez, our operations on Long Island. For those of you who don't know who we are, Suez is the company, environmental company, global company that was hired by Nassau County at the end of 2014 to operate and maintain the sewer system. Our company is responsible for operation and maintenance, so we don't deliver the general capital program, but we do obviously coordinate on a daily basis with all the various capital work that's going on in the sewer system, and there's quite a bit of it. There's quite a bit going now and into the future. So I can't really speak to the funding sources for it because I'm not involved with that, but what I can do is give you a flavor for what Nassau is doing and why. And a lot of it keys into what Maureen talked about, and it's in particular it's the Western Bays. And that right now, and actually for the last few years since Sandy, the greater effort has been focused on Bay Park, ultimately to improve and bring back the Western Bays. But before that, the investment really is based on is focused on recovery and resiliency. So meaning repairing the damage that was caused by Superstorm Sandy, which was extensive. The entire site practically went underwater, and it was basically a catastrophe. And kudos to the DPW and the people in Nassau County at that time for actually getting it up and running. Because it was catastrophic. So repairing all that damage to the facility and then putting in place infrastructure so that it doesn't happen again. And what do I mean by that? If you go to the Bay Park facility right now in East Rockaway, you'll see it's very visible. There's a flood wall that was built around the entire site so that the elevation of that is built for the 500-year flood event. So well above the elevation from Superstorm Sandy. In addition, you'll also see very visibly electrical distribution improvements at the plant. All of the electrical distribution, all the main substations, were raised actually above the elevation of the flood wall. So that if Superstorm Sandy or the 500-year flood comes, it won't flood inside the station. And if there is some 1,000-year storm or something like that, even then we'd still protect the electrical distribution. I can tell you that in this, everybody remembers this last March when we had 4 consecutive nor'easters. There was some severe flooding in the area of Bay Park. We closed the gates for the facility, so the facility was completely enclosed. And water did come up on the southeast side of the plant, and if not for the flood wall and for the gates, it would have flooded the site, or at least a portion of it. So significant investment has been done there, and it's ongoing. Right now, the Sandy Recovery Program is approximately 60% either completed or in progress. So there's still a bit more to go, but quite a significant amount of work has been done, and the plant is much more resilient today for that investment. But the investment related to Sandy, it went beyond just recovery and resiliency. It actually went into improving the environmental performance of the facility. And again, what Maureen talked about, the nutrient loading into the Western Bays. A significant project that's just starting now, and actually there's 2 projects that are going to be starting, is for biological nutrient removal at Bay Park. These are projects designed to remove nitrogen from the effluent. When these projects are completed, the plant will effectively remove year-round 50% of the nitrogen load into the Western Bays. that is a significant improvement, and we'll see that in terms of the water quality in Western Bay. So, exciting project. And there are some other things as well that were part of the Sandy recovery. To have what I like to call a triple bottom line improvement for the community. And one specific example is improvements to the sludge dewatering equipment at Bay Park, and in fact at Cedar Creek as well. Sludge is the residual product that comes out of the treatment process. Equipment is being installed, or has been installed, to reduce the volume of the material that's being taken off-site for disposal. That obviously, if you're disposing of less material, there's less money, less cost to remove it. But then in addition, even more importantly, there's an environmental benefit because of the reduced volume, and there's also a community benefit, social benefit, because there's fewer trucks hauling the material out. So really it's triple bottom line. There's the financial, the economic, as well as the social benefits. And then one other, or two other things that are ongoing right now at Cedar Creek, well actually at Cedar Creek and then also at both plants is, and there are things that Suez is actually, one part of the capital investment that Suez is directly involved in, and that's plant automation. We're automating portions of the facilities to make the process run more efficiently, more automatically. And what that does is that frees up the operations staff to actually operate the plant as opposed to starting and stopping equipment manually. That will have a direct impact on the process improvements. And another very exciting project is the Cedar Creek Water Reuse Project. And the project was just kicked off in this last month. The design is starting, and by June, end of June this coming year, we'll have in place a facility that will treat water for all of the plant process needs. And so you say, well, wow, big deal. Well, in fact, that's a huge amount of water. We use almost, or sometimes up to 1 million gallons of water a day. It's 600 gallons per minute, so a little less than 1 million gallons of water a day. So what we're doing is we're putting a plant inside the plant to treat the effluent to a higher level so that we can use the water for plant purposes instead of pumping water out of the aquifers, instead of buying water from American Water, who draws from the aquifers in Long Island. We'll be using the effluent water for plant purposes. That will save approximately 300 million gallons of water pumped out of the aquifer every year. So a significant project. And that's something that the county, actually we're very pleased to say that the county allowed us to actually go ahead with this project. It's being funded by Suez for the benefit of the county. So something that we're giving back for the benefit of being able to operate such a great system. All right, so I'll try and wrap up quickly to talk about medium-term and longer-term projects. In the medium term, we want to do the exact same thing we're doing at Cedar Creek. We want to do at Bay Park. We want to put water reuse at Bay Park. And that has some additional benefits outside of the plant site. There's an adjacent golf course. Potentially, we could irrigate the golf course. So we're using the effluent from the plant to offset more water need or more usage outside the plant site. Wastewater treatment facilities, you know, it's not a glamorous industry, right? You know, people don't really want it. Actually, I just said this morning when I was getting coffee, somebody asked me what I did, and I said, well, I run the sewer system for Nassau County, and they said, well, that's quite a job. I said, yeah, it's a great job, you know, protecting the environment. And I said, in actual fact, my best days are when people don't know I exist. You know, it's not glamorous, but it's absolutely essential. Obviously, without effective sewage treatment, we wouldn't have healthy communities, and we couldn't thrive. At Bay Park, we want to do additional water reuse and use the value that's in the facility, right? There's this effluent that can serve a purpose. It can irrigate a golf course. We treat it just a little bit more, so we're getting value out of it for the community. There's a huge project that's upcoming in the medium term, and it's the Bay Park effluent diversion. And so what that is, you know, when I was talking about we're doing biological nutrient removal to improve the western bays, this would remove the effluent from the western bays, pump it across the county to Cedar Creek to go out to the outfall, which goes out to the Atlantic Ocean. So that would completely remove the nutrient load from the plant to the western bays, which will have a dramatic impact on the water quality. This is an exciting project. It's actually a once-in-a-lifetime project, and it's brilliant for a couple of reasons. One, obviously for the environmental benefit. The second thing is it is a tremendous example of repurposing existing infrastructure for the benefit of the community. There's an old aqueduct, it's a 6-foot diameter pipe, Sunrise Highway, 100 years old. It was originally designed to convey water from Long Island to the city of Brooklyn, New York, for their water supply. It hasn't been in use for a century, but it's sitting there, and the county owns it. And one day, a smart engineer at the DPW said, hey, you know, we've got this huge investment. We want to get the effluent out of the western bays, but that's a $700 million project. If we instead use the assets we have, we can maybe have a $400 million or $450 million project. And that's exactly what the county has started a design on. They actually, 30% design effort just started in the last couple of months. So a really exciting project and something that looking forward to seeing through. All right, enhanced biosolids. Instead of just reducing volume of biosolids, we can treat the biosolids on site. I'm talking about the sludge at the facilities, to produce a beneficial product that can be used for land application. Again, value in these facilities, you know, they're sewer plants, yes, but they have value for the community. So that's another project that's planned. And another exciting environmental project is related to the Western Bays, is the decommissioning of the Long Beach wastewater treatment plant and designing and building a pump station that will pump the sewage over to the Bay Park plant for treatment. That will completely remove all the wastewater flow into the Western Bays. An exciting project coming up in the medium term. Finally, longer term vision. Energy efficiency. The plants, while the county, when you add all this stuff that I've been talking about, it's about $1.6 billion worth of investment that's either, again, has been completed or is going to be completed in the coming 5 to 7 years. There's still large parts of the facilities that are untouched, with old aging equipment, obsolete equipment that needs to be replaced and can be replaced with much higher efficiency equipment, so we reduce the energy load. And in addition, again, using the value of the facility, using biogas, another byproduct of the process, we can actually use that fuel to run the process to a higher level, and maybe even supply gas to the grid. So very exciting. And finally, just back to Suez and what we do, the county hired us for really 3 reasons. One was an environmental reason, obviously there was a financial component, but then also for our expertise and the things we can bring. In our first 4 years well, we're ending just about at the end of our 4th year now operating the facilities, we've gathered a lot of data, particularly in the sewer system, which is a whole untouched infrastructure network. And for those engineers in the audience, you know, there's actually more value buried in the ground than there is at the visible facilities that you see the treatment plants. So there's quite a lot of value in the assets in the ground, and they are in really terrible condition. I could vouch for that for the data we're collecting. But what the good news is, with all this data we're collecting, we'll be able to focus our investment where it needs to go. We can use we've inspected approximately 60% of the system already in Nassau County, and what I mean, to put that in perspective, there's 3,000 miles of pipe in the ground in Nassau County streets, so you stretch it from end to end, you can go to San Francisco. We've looked at about 60% of it, so we have a really good idea of what we need to do and where to get the best bang for the buck for the residents of Nassau County.
Thank you.
Wow, that's cool.
And finally, on our panel is my friend and brother in the Long Island labor movement, Mario Matera, who's a business agent for Local 200 of the Plumbers Union, who his members certainly know this from the ground up. They do the work. Mario, with his own expertise in this business over many years, is also on the board of Suffolk County Water Authority, and I'm told by the director that when he wants to know how he actually has to do something, you can ask Mario. So, Mario?
Well, one thing I just was, from your knowledge right here,
I need to get probably like 2,000 plumbers to work now. I gotta go organize, because with all this, we're very, very excited about this. You know, my name is Mario Matera, I'm business agent with Plumbers Local 200, but yes, I sit on the Suffolk County Water Authority, which I'm very, very proud of. We're the largest water supplier in the whole nation. And what Peter Scully has said also too, with those water rates, you sit there, and still when we raise it like 4%, you know, you sit there and you get people coming, you raised my water rates. It is the best bill you ever want to pay. You don't even mind writing the check when you know, your Suffolk County Water Authority bill. So, but there is situations where, like in Florida, like where my mom lives in Naples, water coming in, water going out, you get charged. My mom's water bill is $250 a month down in Florida. So, you know, you sit there and people with, you know, living here on Long Island, it's very, very difficult. But, you know, sitting and listening to all, like with the governor and getting our money finally back. You know, we have close to, what, 4 million people from the National and Suffolk County. We're finally, and thank you, I commend Governor Cuomo for caring about Long Island, because we send so much money upstate and everything like that, and we really haven't been receiving it. But lately we have. And it's been so important that, in other words, we need to educate our politicians. With the National Suffolk Building Trades, everybody thinks, oh, we just want to go to work, we don't care. We very much do care. We care, yes, sewers are not sexy. Mr. Cameron, where's Mr. Cameron? Oh, it's not a sexy thing to talk about, but...
For some it is.
Like, it is. Yes, but it's a necessity. It is so important that we have to sewer Suffolk County. No disrespect what's happening with Nassau County, you know, they're tying into Lloyd's and areas. Very disheartening to see what's happening. Yes, it was going out, you know, it's getting discharged out to the bay, getting discharged out to the sound, you know, in a lot of ways 75%. It's not replenishing our aquifers that is so important. We have certain sizable projects that will be coming out. I don't want to really get into any names right now with the jobs. The National Suffolk Building Trades, we feel that these certain jobs, a certain amount of gallons per day is going to get discharged, that these projects should have their own state-of-the-art sewer treatment plant, just like the one we built at Riverhead. You know, this is the only plant that is in New York State in Riverhead that irrigates the Indian Point Golf Course, the Suffolk County Golf Course. Peter Scully, I give credit, right, to our county executive, the New York State, for helping fund this. As clean as that glass of water that's on that table right there that comes out of this plant, okay, with the MBR on it, that big MBR that is taking care of that. But still, in the wintertime, it still goes into the Peconic. Yes, it's clean water. It still needs to go back and replenish. You know, I see Lake Ronkonkoma. I'm a Smithtown boy my whole life. Lake Ronkonkoma, never did you ever see 60 feet of beach. At one time, if everybody knows Lake Ronkonkoma, Bavarian Inn, it was flooded out, Ocean Road. It would get flooded out. Now, all of a sudden, you see it, Laurel Lake, Artist Lake. The problem you see, I'm sorry, they're actually eroding. So you sit there, they are tied. The USGS says, yes, that is tied to our aquifer. We need to replenish with projects, because there'll be a moratorium on building if we don't. Right now, Queens is opening up, I think, 4 of the old wells. That's going to hurt Nassau County. In other words, with the depletion of their water. We got to make sure that we replenish. So you know what? With plants like this, we have a plant in Hauppauge that does replenish the aquifer for the future. So, you know, with the National Suffolk Building Trades, we're not just sitting here and saying, oh great, we got jobs, you know, we're going to be building all these, you know, sewage treatment plants, these chromoglass systems, whatever. We need to build plants just like this plant in Riverhead for the future. The only one in New York State. It is unacceptable that we only have the one. And I commend that, in other words, that Nassau County right now is looking to go replenish our aquifer with an MBR. Am I correct by saying that?
Well, yeah, do water reuse, you know?
Right, yes, water
Reduce the
reuse,
stress on
but
it.
the effluent, you know? You know, you can call gray water, we're not calling gray water. But, you know, with the Board of Health, perfect example, you cannot build certain projects unless the Board of Health approves it. Right now, I sit on the St. James Civic, which I'm very, very proud of. That Smithtown, we have Eddie Wareheim who's here today, the Smithtown supervisor. He has a goal, he has a future, he knows, in other words, we need sewers. Okay, moving forward. Lake Avenue right now, next year, will be putting a dry sewer main, unheard of, finally got $4 million. Senator Flanagan sat in his office, explained to him that we're gonna be putting a new water main down Lake Avenue. Right now, we have vacant stores, 20 vacant stores on Lake Avenue in St. James. Beautiful hamlet. We want our hamlet to look like a Babylon village, okay? Brings in revenue. Right now, what we're gonna be doing is, we're gonna get the dry sewer main in without even having a sewage treatment plant. Unheard of, right? There it is. The senators saw this, made sure we got the $4 million with our water main, with our downtown revitalization. We will be, right now, hopefully it's gonna be going right to Jaredine. Jaredine's gonna have a project over there in Flowerfield area, and that hopefully is gonna work out with the sewage, state-of-the-art sewage treatment plant that will be being developed by the developer. So you know what? A lot's happening in Smithtown finally, before Main Street. And you know what? I know Kings Park, Linda's sitting there going, I can't believe it. There's gonna be a pipe that's gonna be finally laid in Smithtown, and how important this is for our future. So you know what? Sewering is the future. Without the infrastructure, we cannot do anything moving forward in our counties. And I commend, this panel right here. Peter Scully, forget it, I can't, your knowledge is amazing. But me, I want to see state-of-the-art, I'm going to say it again, sewage treatment plants like the one in Riverhead, that, in other words, that is replenishing somewhat, but plants like this with sizable projects need to go back into our groundwater to protect our precious aquifer, because we are made out of water, everybody. We all know that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. So let's jump into it if anybody has any. Yes.
Good afternoon, thank you for having us. A lot of talking about sewers and everything that I understand, but where does Huntington fit in here? You hear about billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars all throughout the community, and it seems that Huntington Station actually has probably one of the cheapest projects you can do, because all you have to do is go from the trestle down to Walt Whitman Mall, and with a couple of pump stations. Where does Huntington Station fit in here?
I can address that. That's a good question. So there is a Suffolk County capital project underway where the design of a connection between the Huntington Station area and sewer district number 3 is now underway.
That study's supposed to have been done in November, is it done yet?
No, it's not completed yet. There are some issues with the collection system, a portion to the collection system between Huntington Station and sewer district number 3 that need to be addressed. This is probably news to people who are interested in it, but the fact is that the connections to sewer district number 3 were kind of done piecemeal, and there are some situations in which the diameter of the existing pipe may not be adequate to handle the flows from Huntington Station. It needs to be assessed before the design can be completed. That's what's
Well,
going
that's
on.
supposed to go down Route 110 down to Southwest, right, correct? Because it's the Huntington Village, the one in Huntington Harbor, well, I don't think it's able to maintain.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a connection to sewer district number 3 Southwest, the Bergen Point Treatment Facility in Valley.
And this is the first time it's ever been discussed about the diameter of the pipe, because I'll be honest with you, sir, nobody in Huntington knows, this has never been mentioned at any meetings in Huntington Station regarding the sewers, that there's problems with the diameters of the pipe.
I didn't use the word problem, I used the word issue, and it is new information. I'm sorry, you're interrupting me. You want me to respond? Okay. You do want me to respond? Yes? Okay, sorry, you were interrupting me. Yes, it's new information. The design engineers who are doing the project are now taking a hard look at the diameter to make sure that the diameters of the pipes are adequate to handle the flows. That's what's going on right now. I can't identify it as a problem, I can identify it as something that's being assessed right now. But the Huntington Station project is funded, and the idea is to connect it to sewer district number 3. The estimated cost of the project is $20 million.
Other questions?
I guess,
Yeah.
I understand that Suffolk County is thinking about or looking at public-private partnerships, and I wonder if you could expand on what the thinking is on things like that to fund sewer projects?
Well, the legislator from the Sayville Oakdale area, Bill Lindsay III, is interested in looking at a P3 model for sewering on a pilot basis to see how it would, how it could work in Suffolk County. So I think what happened most recently is that the Department of Economic Development and Planning issued a request for proposals for a company to take a look at the viability of that to connect areas along Islip South Shore to sewer district number 3.
Okay, and that's moving forward, or?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with or aware of the status of the RFP.
Okay.
Moving forward.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. My question is for Sue. Just trying to get a better picture of your relationship with the county. Let's say you're analyzing your system and you think about certain improvements which would lead to the benefits which you were speaking to on the screen. In your operating contract with the county, are you free to implement those changes as the company sees them to be a benefit, or must all changes go in front of the county, whichever county you're working with, in order to be approved before you can implement it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And in Nassau County, the county approves all projects. So our scope is strictly operation and maintenance, but we do gather a lot of data, and we do consult, if you will, provide input and advisement on capital investment. Obviously by virtue of our position, we see what's happening every day, and we can make good recommendations. But the approval comes from the county, and the funding, generally speaking, comes from the county. There's a potential that the funding could come from Suez. There's a number of different ways that the county could deliver projects, but generally speaking, the vast majority is coming from the county.
Awesome, thank you.
But I do have to just point out too, that the water reuse project, Suez funded on their own. They saw the benefits, they saw the economic benefits, that it made sense, and they went ahead with that project, and that was not funded by the county.
So that was something like, in that particular case, that was something you guys came up with on your own, presented it to them, said, here, we'll take care of the cost if you give us a go-ahead.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Other question? Yes.
Does your study include the impact of well waters, home with well water at this time in terms of the part of the infrastructure?
I'm sorry, does the study include?
Homes with well.
There are, private wells still being used here on Long Island for drinking water, mainly on the North Fork of Long Island. And I don't know what.
40,000 private wells.
And they're spread all over the place.
40,000.
Yeah. So I don't know what study you're referring to though.
What is the recommendation for those homes with well water?
Connect to public water wherever possible.
Just so you know, Suffolk County Water Authority, we just did a huge project in Waynescott, out east, and we hooking up close to 500 homes out there to that because of the contaminants that were out there. And that's what we're looking to do. Obviously, hook up to city water. That's the best thing to do, is hook up to city water.
Is there a grant to do that, or because that's a very expensive proposition?
No, what's happening with Suffolk County Water, with all the grants and all the monies out there, it's being paid for by government funds.
But those that do not hook up, we encourage them to get their well water tested. It's important for private residents that have well water and are using it for drinking, that they do get it tested on a regular basis.
Well, I have well water since 1977, but I don't drink it. I purchase water. And I'm just wondering, in terms of maybe getting out of the home at some point, who would want to purchase a home that's still using well as a well?
So it's a good point. What you raise, one thing we were just sort of discussing, one thing that's I like to point out is, especially in the P3 framework of public-private partnerships and figuring out revenue streams that you can generate to pay for a lot of this capital infrastructure improvements upfront, which nobody has that kind of money, right? One way to do it is, and we've done it especially in the transportation realm. Other states are doing it better. We're learning to do it. And I think there's avenues here for water, and especially on the sewage side, is if you create zones on Long Island where you're putting in the system for the first time, where none existed, property values will go up. People will want to live in those areas and in those zones because you're bringing a system into place for the first time. If you create those zones, it's called value capture. What you're able to do is you're able to then project out the assessed tax receipts on those properties for the future, because property values will go up. The tax receipts against those property values will go up for the counties. The counties can then bond out against those projections and get from the market very quickly capital influx that can be then used. It's called tax increment financing. We use it a lot in the transportation realm. When you think about train stations, for example, right? When you put a station in and you reduce the commuting time for the local population, people want to live closer, especially in the New York City market where the subway is going. I think there's avenues there for water, and especially for the sewer side, where systems didn't exist. You introduce a system, you can pay yourself back by sort of lockboxing off that increased property value assessment for that purpose, and that's a good boon to the community as well. So it's an idea that I think the county should be looking at.
Where do you live?
West Blocket Road, Middle Island.
You're in Middle Island?
Yeah.
So do you have water under your block? Do you have any,
I'm sure there is.
do you have Suffolk County water on your block?
I'm sure there is, but
You should really check into that, because not for anything, you pull up Suffolk County water, they will come and evaluate. They will actually go and test your water in our high-tech lab over in Hop Hop. They will come right over there and test you, have your water tested.
because
That's
I think although I purchase water to drink and cook, that should I want to get rid of the place,
Well, that's something very important
I
to do.
think that that's something we need to look at in terms of probably decreasing value of the property as it is.
I bet you have the water main right in front of your home, you don't even
That
know.
would be good.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? Yes.
Well,
Let's
I
get somebody,
really got sorry.
yeah, you had
I just
one.
had a question on Southwest, is that Burger Point, is that?
Yes.
Yeah. How much capacity is there? I'm hearing potentially a lot of projects connecting to that spot, you know, Lincoln Station.
So in 2000,
Oakdale Sable area, and
great question.
Ron Mahab, and then also, where does the outflow pipe go? And then-
The facility uses an ocean outfall. It's about 2 miles out into the Atlantic. Answer the last question first. With regard to capacity, a 10 million gallon per day expansion of the facility from 30 million gallons per day to 40 million gallons per day is nearing completion. That capacity is going to become available over the next few months. The county zealously tracks commitments of capacity and potential commitments of the capacity moving forward. We can't very well tee up the connections to the facility and then not have capacity, so we carefully track that. There are no capacity issues at the facility now. With the addition of a couple more components to the facility, the 40 million gallons per day facility that we're expanding by 10 million gallons, we could add another 6 million gallons per day if we needed to. There are really no capacity issues at Bergen Point.
Okay, yes, your question.
I think it's great that we do protect our water, but a lot of the issues also has to do, what about these plumes that are everywhere? I mean, you can sit down and like you can refill the water, whatever you do. How are you guys working with the government, especially like over by Drummond, for instance, with all of these plumes? I mean, it's like taking sand to the beach. If you're not going to fix those issues, how, they're a big.
Nobody here, I think the issue is a great issue. Nobody here at this table is working on those issues, but I can tell you as a former regional director at DEC that it's a significant concern. Particularly on Long Island, right, where we're living essentially on a sandbar, we have a legacy of a community that was very dependent on the defense industry. With the best of intentions, we were very supportive of our defense industry and defense economy. We've since learned that the practice of simply injecting the waste into the ground was not the best idea, right? And so across, right? I mean, we have a state law on Long Island that says, at this point, that says you can't bury solid waste on Long Island at all because we have a sole source aquifer. Liquid waste, have at it, right? So it's a significant concern. We're spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, cleaning up some of these past environmental insults. We can't change the fact that they're there. But there's a significant, negative economic impact associated with the cleanup. And the government agencies are working it hard. You can see the information about what they're doing on public websites if you're interested in an individual site or plume. But your observation about how many plumes are out there, and the fact that we need to clean them up, is spot on. There's no question about it. Absolutely a concern. There's a tremendous investment ongoing in it. New plumes are being discovered, unfortunately, regularly just because of impacts from things like fueling stations and dry cleaners and all that sort of thing. But there are government agencies on top of them. They're unfortunate, they're costly, and it's a constant burden on government to get ahead.
Well, Citizens Campaign for the Environment has been working on that issue. We have been working with communities in those areas and working with the agencies to ensure comprehensive cleanups are done.
What about the federal government?
We have time for one more quick question, we have to break, yes, sir.
What's the total number to sewer Suffolk County? Is that an actual figure? Is that an actual figure?
Give that big number again.
IBM Corporation in 2014 sent a team of experts to assess the problem in Suffolk County. They concluded that in order to address wastewater needs in Suffolk County, it would take at that time $8 billion.
But there are
8,000 million.
And there are some communities that do not want to be sewered. There are some communities that don't want sewers at all, and that's why, Suffolk County's program to switch out septic systems for these new innovative septic systems that will treat nitrogen is such a good program.
Yeah, let me, 30 seconds, I'll shut up, we'll get out of here. Sewers themselves are not a cost-effective solution for many areas of Suffolk County, just because the development density is such that it wouldn't be cost-effective. One of the projects we're doing is more than $100,000 per parcel to connect. Nassau did a study of the area along the North Shore and came up with figures that were higher than that. You can't pay $120,000 a parcel of sewer, just doesn't make sense.
I'll add a 10-second little note here, just for context again. The state budget runs on an annual cycle. It starts in January, and by the state constitution, the budget's going to be approved by April 1. I'm adding that only because a lot of times in my previous government role, I met a lot of communities, including from Long Island, that would want government assistance or grants or loans or some sort of financial assistance to move projects. Then politically, there'd be pushback. Some controversy would erupt. Elected officials, government officials, maybe in the region would get cold feet. The issue wouldn't proceed forward, the funding would not be utilized. It used to happen all the time, then 3 years later I'd get a call and somebody would say, we had this money. The governor said you would get this money, where's the money? Because things hadn't happened. By default, if you get money on the table from the government, use it. Because if you don't, by default, come April 1, previous commitments expire. They're gone. And government is in the business of spending the money it has because it wants to make those obligations, those commitments, it wants to get the money out the door, because on an annual cycle, and we talked about the federal tax cuts, for example, if the state gets a deficit in the next cycle, there's no money left to spend. So when you get the commitment and you get the obligation, my advice always is, take them up on it, get the authorization, get the obligation invested. Otherwise, you don't know what the future holds.
And I just wanted to point out that I do have some handouts up front on the toxic tides as well as the Suffolk County Septic System Replacement Program.
This group could talk about sewers for hours.